If ever your life could be a true crime podcast episode, then this podcast is for you. We're about to embark on a roller coaster of emotions, insights, survival, and stories about escape. So buckle up and let the journey begin.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of The Escape Pod, a part serious, part hilarious dramedy featuring stories of escape.
We're going to be talking about escaping from all kinds of things that have a tendency to ruin and shape our lives, from unhealthy relationships to perpetrators of crime to more lighthearted subject matter like escaping annoying group text messages or good deeds that never seem to go unpunished. So why do we even bother trying to be nice? I'm Charity.
And I'm Julie. And we work at a nonprofit called One Heart in Rapid City, South Dakota, that helps people escape the crisis of poverty and other negative influences while they work to change their own lives for the better. For more on that, check out our prologue episode all about One Heart. For now, though, Charity, why don't you tell us why you wanted to do this podcast and what you hope listeners get out of it?
So many reasons. There's so many reasons why I wanted to start this podcast. So in no particular order, I'll just kind of puke at you all of the reasons and feel free to drill down. One of the big ones, though, is just the work that we're engaged in every day. Knowing that when I meet with people and they don't see themselves as capable of change. They don't see themselves as capable of actually building a better life. They have hope and they want to, but they think there's something inherently wrong with them. And not that long ago, I was like them. And it's really interesting when you're stuck in those high crisis lifestyles, you start to internalize the things that are happening to you and feeling like you are, like I said, inherently broken or flawed, and that you're causing this, not understanding that it's really a different part of the brain that you're operating from. And so I'm fascinated by that because, you know, when growing up, I exhibited many of these things, went through a lot of adventures. A lot of the stories we're going to talk about throughout this podcast don't necessarily have happy endings. Some of mine don't, some of mine do. But I just want people to understand that they are not alone and they can break these cycles. It's the more that they understand, the more empowered they become, the more that they can take control over these influences in their life and actually use them to catapult themselves into the next level, the next, phase of life. So it's to connect, it's to build a sense of community. I'm also a true crime fanatic, and there's parts of true crime that don't often get any sunlight, looking at, sometimes they do, and some podcasters are really good about it, but it's prevalently about the crime and the criminal and the perpetrator of the crime, not the reasons why these things are happening, or like the ancillary victims in a situation, right?
Right.
And we have lots of stories queued up to kind of talk about that. Like we don't talk about, for instance, you being on a college campus at CSU when, what was his name?
Oh, Mr. Graves.
Yeah.
His first name is eluding me, but we'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, but we do have that one queued up. But the things that are permanently etched into your psyche from living through that without actually having any direct interaction, right?
Yeah.
So I just think this level of victimization and trauma, it goes so much further than just the immediate thing. Mm-hmm. And to really peel back the onion and look at layers is really important, but to also give hope. I'm sure there were times in my life when I believed it, and other people probably in my life believed that I would never amount to anything because of the choices I was making that was all predicated on the crisis brain I was stuck in that cycle of. And I'm here to say bullshit. I'm here to say that you can absolutely do this against the odds, and that's that's why we do the work we do. And while this podcast won't necessarily be about the work we do, Julie and I are both very passionate about it, so it is invariably going to come up. And so, we'll try to keep it to a minimum. But like she said earlier, for those of you who are interested, can always go back and listen to the prologue to the podcast if you want to learn more.
Yeah. And for me, I am not a true crime fanatic. However, at least not a true crime podcast fanatic as of yet. And part of that is because I used to be a reporter. And as a reporter, I did cover a lot of crime and courts and always found it very fascinating, even though it always shocked my husband that I liked covering court cases. What I liked covering about court cases was that you had both sides of a story essentially laid out in front of you as the course of the case and the trial went on. You had what both sides were saying about the events of whatever led up to whatever happened during and the consequences of any particular crime. And so I just found it to be super interesting. I was interested in law at a young age. Even in college, I nearly left journalism behind to think of going to law school, but I wasn't going to do criminal law. I was going to do media law if I did it. However, I just stuck with the journalism. Was a TV news reporter for a long time and anchor and producer. But I just find some of the stories fascinating. I think, like you, I remember very clearly covering a case where I literally it involved a number of young people. They were teenagers, early 20-somethings. It was a crime kind of centered around some drug use and an individual who had let this kind of group hang out at her house. And she ended up being the victim of a murder. And I remember getting into the elevator with the couple members of the victim's family, and even one of them said, "Where are their parents?" Even she recognized in listening to some of the testimony, these are lost young men. They had not a lot of guidance. They had not a lot of positive things happening in their lives. And in turn, turned to, again, drugs, drinking, things like furthering your education or going and getting a better job, things of that nature weren't parts of their conversations, at least not from what I could gather.
Well, that's crisis brain, though, right? Because you're just thinking of when you're in that kind of situation and you don't see a way out, it's how can I get through this moment?
Yeah.
It's not so college and thinking or education, thinking about the future.
Right.
They're incapable at that point in time. That's what crisis brain is all about. So, I mean, that really relates to what we're talking about.
Yeah. And on the lighter side of things, so we're in a lovely little suite here in the lower level of our main provider building on the campus where we work. And it's kind of its own escape pod, right? Because we do very challenging work and we will invite others in from our world and people we partner with and things like that along the lines and give them a chance to essentially escape just the day-to-day challenges of work for a little while and visit with us about both the good, bad, and ugly of all sorts of things that go on in our lives. And a lot of things, are serious topics, but we'll try and throw some lighter topics in there as well.
Or self-deprecating.
I mean, there might be
ridicule.
I mean, it goes on.
We have agreed that I will be the sacrificial lamb because of the plethora of.
She has some stories.
Yeah. It's bizarre to even think about.
So what are we trying to escape from in this very first episode 1 today?
Well, you want to say the name of the episode?
I modify it because I grew up in a house where we didn't get to swear very often. You had to really mean it. But I'll just call it Stuff My Mom Did.
Oh, I thought the episode name was going to be The Wheels.
Oh, you want to do that one?
Yeah.
We went back and forth on what to call it. The wheels on the bus go bang, bang, bang. The wheels on the bus go bang, bang, bang.
Bang, bang,
because
bang.
of a young charity.
So with that said, I'm trying to escape my 13-year-old self, probably by the time we're done with this. Yeah.
Can I just say if my nearly 13-year-old did this?
What would you have done? Intervention, right? Something is desperately, seriously going on with my child.
Yes.
We need to intervene.
1,000%.
That is not what happened in my life.
What did happen? Let's start at the beginning, shall we?
Lord have mercy.
Well, we won't start at the very beginning. That's going back 13 years too far. But
Well, that's going back preconception. We won't do that.
yeah, right.
So the wheels on the bus go bang, bang, bang. How do I cue this one up? So 13-year-old Charity, very low self-confidence, grew up with drugs in the household from the time I was born. A lot of secrecy, a lot of shame, a lot of different things, things I couldn't share with or tell my friends. So it was always, not many sleepovers because, Dad couldn't use if I had people over and that kind of a thing. So I just going into, and we moved around a lot. My dad was in the military before discharge, and so we moved around a lot. And this is where I'm from. We landed here and came back in 5th grade, and I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to have friends. I wanted to be accepted. And my low self-esteem, I think, really came from being born to teenagers. Sure. I don't have that experience, so this is all conjecture, but I imagine it would be a lot to take on as a 16 and 17-year-old, new parents. So it was just, priorities are different. Mm-hmm. I think about how probably self-centered I was at that age. I couldn't imagine having a baby to try to focus on, right? So while I was clothed and sheltered, there were a lot of things that I didn't have, and that, was like that positive, consistent, invested and interested attention from a father, a male figure. So my whole life, tremendous self-confidence issues, always chasing, like completely boy crazy. I just now sitting here thinking about this, I'm remembering like even in grade school, and I know you talk about Jonathan and dressing up and,
Yes.
being Mr. Ladies Man.
My youngest has.
Oh, he's so cute.
Yes, he is cute. It's both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
We'll just leave that there.
But like that's so sweet and sincere, and
Yeah.
and mine was like obsessive and unhealthy. It just wasn't good, and that comes from a lot of other abuse, younger, which we won't go into. But this particular episode, going into, I was in 7th grade, and a couple of things converged. One is always trying to get my dad's attention, and so I did that through learning, becoming as smart as I could be on equipment and repairing things. Anything mechanical I would take apart, learn how it works, be able to fix it. Actually had a little business when I was in college, for real, like repairing VCRs and sewing machines and things like that. Anything I could get my hands on.
Ancient artifacts?
They are ancient artifacts now. That nowadays, with everything computerized, no clue. I'm good.
I do know what a VHS tape is.
Yeah.
I've used VHS tapes.
Those were so simple. Like they were, I could just understand it, open it up and go, oh, okay, yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
And so if something was wrong, I could figure out what was wrong with it. And,
Sure.
And I thought, ooh, this is how I'll get that good. Because my dad was that way. He could fix just about anything. I didn't work that way. And it did get me into some trouble in a variety of capacities. So I decided that I was tired of just kind of being a nobody. I wanted to be popular, but I was never going to be popular in like the preppy girls, the way they dressed, and that I was never going to be accepted in those circles. I mean, I was living in one of the shittiest trailer parks in Rapid City, and so that was never going to be my future, right? But I could be popular in other ways. And so that was kind of this gnawing thing of how can I fit in and find my people and be seen as something. It didn't have to be good, which ended up sticking with me, but as something, right? So one day we're on the bus as we're going home, and I am noticing the aisle in the middle of the bus that you walk down, and it's grooved to drain water away and create some traction. I don't know where the idea came from, but I'm looking at these grooves and I'm like, that's about the same width as a bottle rocket. I wonder if one would fit right there and sail right up to the front of the bus if I were to ignite it from close to the back of the bus. The idea would not go away. And so the next school day, I did exactly that. I'm going to throw up again. Every time I start telling this story, I get like this pit in my stomach that's like, how could you have done this? So I brought a bottle rocket to the bus. I ignited the bottle rocket from almost the back of the bus. All the popular older like upperclassmen sat in the back. It went off, and it did exactly what I imagined. But I didn't get beyond that in my envisioning of what might happen, right?
Well, consequences, I mean, we know the young brain in and of itself is not fully developed when you're 12, 13, 14 years old. You're still a long way from that. But on top of that, again, that young person trying to prove something, trying to get attention, which I always tell my kiddos, negative attention is still attention, and sometimes that's what kiddos seek. And so you're not thinking about what if.
Not consequences. No.
What could happen if this works? And actually, if it works really well, which it did, what happened?
It exploded like you would imagine a firecracker would do. So yeah, it zips to the front of the bus, right under the front seat, so between the driver's seat and the front seat. And it was a full bus. We were hurling at 45 miles an hour on the highway. When this happened, this trailer park was right off of the highway. And it scared the living shit, I imagine, out of the people. I mean, I saw people jump out of their seats. It was so bad. It's not funny. I was a ridiculously damaged human being laugh.
It's the nervous laughter.
It is. I literally do feel like I'm going to throw up telling this. But it exploded, and the bus filled with smoke. The bus driver's name was Bear. Enough said. Pulls over and was very angry, as he should have been.
Sure.
And is wanting to know who did it, and no one would turn me in. So the people who would have turned me in didn't know that I did it. The ones that knew I did it wouldn't rat me out. So he finally gets us to school, holds us hostage until somebody fesses up. And so I did. I'm like, my intention was not to keep people from school. So I stood up and said, yeah, it was me. So as far as the popularity thing went, it worked. And I created a reputation of being very wild, and it never went away. Even nowadays, people see me, if they realize who I was back then, are like, oh, no, like, how are you this now when you were that then? It really freaks them out.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, just the other day, I believe the quote was, well, my husband's never been bored
No.
being married to me because, I mean, and by the way, can I just mention at this point that you are actually married to a law enforcement officer now. And I did ask him what you would have been charged with, because I'm like, surely this was a crime that she committed.
This is true crime, yeah.
He mentioned, like disturbance of school, possibly like vandalism, depending on what could have happened, that sort of thing. Nothing like, nobody was hurt.
No, but
we don't think somebody might have been.
Somebody may have been traumatized and never able to listen to fireworks again. I mean, like, seriously, I probably damaged people. It's horrible. And think about the things that could have happened. If the bus driver had a scare response like I do, I would have jerked into traffic. We could have wrecked. We could have flipped. It was a school bus full of junior high school children. I could have been a freaking criminal. I could have been screwed the rest of my life from that incident. So I did get in school suspension for like a week or two.
And did you get your dad's attention?
I don't remember. Isn't that wild? Honestly,
it's
don't
weird
remember.
not to remember that part of it when that's what you were looking for.
He could be very violent, so I don't know if something happened and I blocked it out, or he just didn't care. It's like,
yeah. But you were punished at school.
Oh, I was punished at school. I'm sure I got at least grounded at home. But I honestly cannot think of a single conversation, interaction with either of my parents over that incident. I would imagine the school let them know. I don't think they would just throw me in ADSP and walk away.
Right.
But it's weird because that was like those two things were the outcomes I wanted to be put on the map as someone who was not being overlooked any longer and get attention from my dad. And I can't remember the latter.
Fascinating.
Yeah, because brains are crap.
Well, we're going to take just a short break. Stay with us. We'll talk more about some other bus incidents that didn't have the same kind of not dramatic ending that Charity's had. Just be forewarned, we do get into some tougher topics when we come back. At One Heart, transforming lives begins with safe, stable housing and a support system that allows people to reach their true potential. It requires motivation, mentorship, and a myriad of services. It takes time and treasure, but it's worth it because it's working. One Heart provides people with a sense of security, opportunities for economic advancement, and adds dozens to the workforce each year. Learn more about why One Heart works at oneheartrc.org. Welcome back to the Escape Pod. This is our very first episode. We're calling it Wheels on the Bus Go Bang, 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 based on the story that Charity just told about her 13-year-old self trying very hard to be popular in school and also popular with her father, one of which worked, the other didn't as well, unfortunately. And so her story didn't have any serious consequences. We can't reiterate enough. Nobody was seriously hurt. The bus did not go off the road. She was punished for it in school. So there were consequences. Fortunately, those consequences were minimal compared to the what ifs. But kids and buses really do have potentially some very serious consequences when things go awry. So Charity, go ahead and share the couple of stories that you learned about in reminiscing about your own bus incident.
Well, the first thing I want to say, there are some trigger warnings. Some of these stories, there are two coming up. One involves sexual assault involving children, and one involves what was charged as a hate crime. I'll leave you to determine if you think that's what that is. Very well could be. It is what it is. But the point I want to make is with this being a traumedy, we'll do our best to try to find humor in some of these situations, but a lot of the topic is very traumatic. It's things that are ruining lives if going unaddressed, and seeing the results of that crisis brain and the results of unresolved trauma can be so devastating. And when you think about school buses, so that's the theme all these stories have today, due to me, not really intentionally trying to blow up one, but definitely filling one with smoke. The other two involve buses as well. And so this first one happened in just February of this year, Aldine, Texas. And it was a sexual assault case involving an 11-year-old male perpetrator and a 6-year-old male victim. So what happened is that this sexual assault had been happening for a couple of months on the school bus home. And I know I've put my children on school buses. Mm-hmm. Mine are grown now. You assume and expect that they are going to be safe, right? That fireworks are not going to go off on the bus. And then, worse, that your children are not going to be assaulted. There's bullying. There's things like that. Kids can be just jerks. And so some of that stuff's going to happen. But this was taken to such an extreme. And it is really, really an upsetting and tragic story. So how this comes to light is that the little guy, it's been going on for a couple of months, and he has said nothing to his mother. And I don't know, but I imagine it's because he didn't have the words. Having been a victim of some things myself, you don't have the words sometimes to understand what's happening to you. And so there's just no frame of reference. Like, it is what it is. I don't know how to make sense out of it, or if it's bad, or if it's right, if it's not. Like, we just don't know. But anyway, this little guy comes home and he doesn't have his backpack. Thank God he didn't have his backpack. And Mom, of course, is like I would question that. Well, where's your backpack? So he says, another kid had thrown it out of the window. And so she knew that there were video recordings on the bus and calls the bus yard and says, hey, I want to find out who did this so I can have a conference with the school and this child's parents. And again, not anything she said in any of the reports that I read did she assume it was bullying, but I know that's what I would have assumed, that it was just some childhood BS and, someone's being mean to my kid. So they go to look into it. And a few hours later, they call her and say, hey, we really need to visit with you. And she is reported to have said, well, I'm thinking my kid's in trouble. He did something. So she gets there and they have to break the news to her that her son was being raped. And there was obviously an investigation done, talked to the bus driver. At one point, the bus driver actually pulled over the bus because she thought they were fighting. I don't know what planet this person was from that they would think this was a fight between an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old. This kid was fighting to prevent what was happening to him.
Sure.
So it's just atrocious. I cannot imagine being in that mother's shoes. I mean, there's so much trust placed in our bus system, our school system, when we let our children out of our sight during the day. And so obviously this came to light. The little guy's getting help. The 11-year-old is facing 3 felony-level charges of aggravated sexual assault. An 11-year-old.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. And I think, for the victim, I think of things in trauma that I've gone through, and there are certainly triggers even after therapy and counseling and all that stuff. There are still triggers. They don't ever totally go away. But a school bus, or, the sound of a school bus, or even a backpack, or any of these things, like, I just pray that this little guy is getting the help he needs and now understands what all of this meant. And I wish that for the 11-year-old too, because that's the thing that I never found in my research on this is, and then if anyone's interested, all of the sources for this are in the show notes. But no one was asking why this 11-year-old is doing that. And I'm one who believes that children that young don't come into the world knowing how to do these things. Something's being done to this kid, not excusing his behavior.
Correct.
But I wish we as a country could, when these things are happening, you don't just look at the victim and the perpetrator and impose support and consequences respectively. You look at that picture and you figure out who is abusing that child, and you start to cut it off, because hurt people end up propagating the same behaviors on other people, particularly when they're so young in their brain's development and they don't understand.
Right. And it doesn't mean there's other people in the family who also need help. Is it, how far does it go? How far, and was it done to him? Maybe it's something, maybe it wasn't physically done to him, but is he watching something with all of our access to all of the information that's out there online? Is he watching something that he should have never been watching? He should have, clearly, like you say, at some point, likely exposed to something that gave him this idea. It probably just didn't pop into his head. And then where do you go from there? I have on that note, again, having spent a long time in TV news and covering a lot of court cases, I have been in courtrooms where a defense attorney will use they're probably the most likely to consider the background, of course, of the defendant in trying to defend them in the court of law. To say, why he committed this heinous crime was because he was abused often as a child.
Right.
And so trying to mitigate it, and again, typically, it's not going to mean you're not going to be punished, but that will often come up in the sentencing phase where it's determined, there is a reason for some of this. It might mitigate the sentencing a bit, but typically it's not going to mean you're off the hook. And not that you should be necessarily.
How often did you see like therapy or some kind of, treatment, counseling, something like that, part of the consequences?
I will be honest, the
Ever?
times that I think that came up the most, the crimes were so heinous. I don't know that anybody cared about offering counseling at that point.
Right. In this one, I'm talking about children. So
I never covered a case involving a child that young. I probably older teenagers was about as far as it went.
Sure.
As far as it went. But yeah, that's one of the only times we kind of look at that. There are some restorative justice cases out there where they very much look at there's a reason this person did this, and that's why we're going to make it part of the healing process. And I think the second story that you're going to share probably falls more along those lines, where there's not a happy ending in that, you can't turn back time and make the incident go away. However, there was a real effort to try to heal as much of the situation as could be healed under the circumstances. So do you want to share that case out of California?
Yes. So this was in the Oakland area, I believe, if memory serves, November of 2013. It was involving, so here's what happened. These kids get on the bus. They all had long rides home from school. It was public transportation, but they were going home from school. The child, 18-year-old student who would end up being the victim of this, was sleeping on the bus, having fallen asleep reading a book. Again, it was a long drive. The other riders get on and notice this kid. They were different. They categorized themselves or classified themselves as agender. Just amazingly bright, talented student that was just different relative to the boys that ended up abusing them. And so these boys get on the bus and they start pointing out the agender child whose skirt was laying over hanging over the edge of the seat. One child hands to the kid who ends up going to prison for what I'm going to describe next, hands him a lighter. This kid's name is Richard. And Richard starts trying to ignite this kid's skirt. And he thought it was just going to be a prank because he would flick it and it would spark a little bit and go out. So he says, flick it. And so he went through this a few times. But on the fourth time, it caught and it went up. So this young person's name was Sasha Fleischman, woke up when their skirt went up in flames. Bus driver stops. They get off. They help get the fire out. Sasha suffered amazingly severe burns on their legs. They were hospitalized for nearly a month. And again, this Richard kid claims that it was just a prank. What was interesting about the interview, and this is why he ultimately got charged with a hate crime, is he assumed because Sasha is agender that they were gay. So he was telling the investigator, I don't have a problem with that or how they were dressed. I am a homophobic. And there's nowhere documented that they can attribute homosexuality to the child who got burned. So it was an assumption, and that's what they pulled out and why they ultimately charged him with the hate crime. So they charged him with aggravated mayhem, assault, and a hate crime, two of which carried mandatory life sentences in the state of California. This is a 16-year-old. Wow. Now, what was really interesting about this is the way Sasha's parents and Sasha handled the situation. They did not agree that a 16-year-old should get charged and tried as an adult, from what I read.
Very interesting.
I don't know if I would be as forgiving as a parent,
I don't know either.
Whose child just got burned. It could have been, they could have burned to death. It was really horrible. Sure. But they were like, okay, this is a 16-year-old. Obviously something needs to be done. He needs consequences, but tried as an adult with two charges that carry mandatory life sentences, that's pretty harsh. And so they were so forgiving that they ended up, the state of California ended up deciding to try him as an adult despite this opposition. But they said if he'd plead guilty to one of the charges, they would drop the two that carried the mandatory life sentence. And one of the things I remember Sasha's parents saying was that our child is healing and ready to move on. Mm-hmm. But what Richard did has changed his family's life forever. And this was a kid, I believe he had a single mom, hard worker, really hoping that Richard would make it out of the cycle and be, a happy statistic and go to college and make something of himself. And it sounds like he came from a good, supportive home and was a kid who was trying not to fall into gang activity, although there was plenty of that in his neighborhood. He would go to after-school things with counselors or different special programs and ask to be admitted, like, can I be part of this? And really trying to take a different path. And so he wrote a very thoughtful apology letter to Sasha, basically saying, I'm not that person. Mm-hmm. Like, I deeply regret what I've done. Mm-hmm. And, please forgive me. And he was forgiven, and it was very beautiful. And I think that's the part I mean, obviously the rest of the story is horrible, but that part of part of that victimization is how you feel about it, and that leftover residual response of what's happened to you.
Yeah.
Where clouds your whole life,
exactly,
or
eat at you forever and cause, a lot of additional problems in life, or
forgive.
Yeah.
And I can't speak to Sasha's mental health. They just seem to have it together for an 18-year-old, very mentally sound. I mean, to be able to forgive and to want to just move on. I just think that's really powerful and profound. And again, this is all conjecture on my part, but I feel like it probably helped this young man in prison. And I remember reading that they were so grateful. Yes, this is the sentence. 7 years, I believe, he served, and he might be able to get out after 5, or could get out at 5. And then I just hope that it was a true lesson learned, transformation, and that the prison experience did not take this kid who perpetrated a prank that went wrong and now is somebody who is living a life of that which he was trying to avoid. I hope that he got out of that and was able to do something with his life. I couldn't find anything else on him, but...
Yeah. Maybe when if he is able to be released in the timely fashion that he could be at this point, we can have an update. And I appreciate ending to pretty sad, and troubling stories. I mean, we are going to tell a lot of hard stories because that's true crime, right? I mean, this world is ugly sometimes, and we know that. However, that has at least a little bit of a happy ending, and again, an opportunity for change. And I think our lives are full of opportunities, and we certainly wish the best for not only the victim, but also the person who does recognize and takes accountability, and desires change. And we desire that for them, of course. We are going to take one more quick break, and when we come back, we'll lighten things up a little bit before we wrap up our first ever episode of The Escape Pod. Need an early morning boost or midday pick-me-up? Check out the Homebrew Coffee Shop, a coffee shop with a cause in the heart of the One Heart campus. Homebrew is home to delicious coffee, sweet treats, breakfast, and lunch items. A great place to meet friends or host small group meetings. Homebrew, located at 201 Kansas City Street in Rapid City. Open Monday through Friday from 6:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. Homebrew, where you'll find hope for a home in every cup. Welcome back to the Escape Pod. I'm Julie, here with my co-host Charity, and again, we are coworkers on the One Heart campus in Rapid City, South Dakota. If you want to learn more about One Heart and a little bit more about why we wanted to do this podcast, you can go to our prologue episode that talks more about this amazing nonprofit that we enjoy working at. But we do get to escape for a little bit every week to the Escape Pod, and also have a little fun while we're down here. So we talk a lot on this podcast about what we want to escape from, or things that people really want or need to escape from. But sometimes we want to escape to a place or to a state of mind. And so, Charity, before we wrap up today,
Oh man, I forgot you were going to ask.
you could escape to someplace, where would it be?
Does it have to be a place?
No, not at all.
Because the first thing that came to mind was I would love to escape to a state of mind where I am never put on the spot and I can actually come up with something that is so profound and amazing right on the fly.
I make no promises.
Today
whatsoever.
is not going to be that day, Julie.
Oh.
So that'd be what I wish.
I would like to escape to a good book, like a really good, cheesy, I don't have to think about anything too serious for a good hour. Can I just tell you, I have an 8-year-old. I've always liked to read, and he does like to read, but the fact that the one little bitty piece of homework that he has to do every day that his teacher asks is read 10, 15 minutes. She doesn't even tell them what they have to read. They can pick. And that kid, some days when he gets in the car and I say, just to make sure, what do you have for homework? And he gives me this like,
He's trying to escape homework.
and I'm like, and he's like, I have to read. And I'm like, and this is what I say. Do you know what I wish somebody would tell me? That I have to read a book of
be so
my
sad,
choosing,
right?
For 15 minutes every day. You have no choice, Julie. You have to. I'd be like, amen, I'm in. So that's my goal. Hopefully later today, I will get a solid 15 minutes with a good, cheesy, lighthearted romance. And that's where I'm escaping to. That's where I'm escaping to.
Well, good luck.
What's a chilly day here in Rapid City,
Good
South
luck.
Dakota. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your story of your 13-year-old self. I know it's not easy sometimes to admit to the
this
good
one
and the
was
bad of life.
I mean, I've told you the story a few times now, so it's getting a little bit easier. So thanks for going easy on me on this one, because as we peel back the onion, it gets blah.
It gets a little yucky sometimes, but the good news is that currently you're a very successful adult woman who was not hindered one bit by her 13-year-old self. So you can take that with you as you leave today.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
I mean you're not lighting bottle rockets on a bus.
No, we did wrap that up in. I don't think I did that since 7th grade. It was a one and done thing.
Okay, good.
I did learn my lesson on that. That might have been
very
the only thing. Well, yeah, no more bottle rockets.
There are other lessons to be learned.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Join us again for another episode of the Escape Pod next week.
And we're really, really, really hoping to build a community out of this. So future episodes will let you know what our socials are. In the meantime, if you do want to reach us for anything and you want to become an escape artist like me, or you have stories you want to share of escaping negative cycles, negative relationships, unhealthy situations, you're welcome to. We would love to read them. Send them to escapeartist@escapepod.live. Or if you just want to say, hey, your episode is really great, or, the first few episodes don't feel bad because they always suck in all podcasts. We get that. You can send those to justbecause@escapepod.live.
Please know I'm very sensitive to criticism.
Oh, yeah, we probably need to bring a box of Kleenex in here, huh?
I once had a woman tell me she felt sorry for my husband for being married to me. So there's
This
that.
is when she was on the air
when I was
as
on
a
TV.
news anchor.
It was a bad day.
Like, who does that?
Somebody who needs to escape from her own life. That's
Good
who.
Lord. Okay.
Also, check out our website, www.escapepod.live. Again, we'll be back again next week, escaping all the things. And until then, have a great week.
Thank you, everybody.